"Please don't do this," the maid begged. What the prince's girlfriend did to the baby was terrible. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The chateau was almost quiet when Eloise climbed the servants' staircase with the jug of warm milk in her hands. The stone steps were narrow and dark. Her shoes made a soft, regular sound as she hurried upward. Somewhere below in the great kitchens, a few maids were still laughing over some joke. But here in the old north wing, the noise of the day had faded. Only the wind pressed at the shutters, and the faint ticking of an unseen clock kept her company. She drew her shawl closer and balanced the jug carefully. "The nurse will scold me if it cools," she murmured to herself. The baby always took milk before sleeping. At least, that was what the nurse said. Heloise had worked at the Château de Villeneuve for only 6 months, but the child had become the quiet center of her days. She did not understand everything about him. No one truly did. The servants called him Little Adrien, and they lowered their voices when they did so, as if the walls had ears. At the top of the stairs, the corridor stretched ahead, dim and still. The nursery lay at the far end, next to a small sitting room that was almost never used. Most of the household stayed in the newer bright wings. This part was for things that were important but inconvenient. Eloise had just taken 3 steps along the corridor when she stopped. There was light under the nursery door, a thin, steady line. She frowned. The nurse usually kept a single candle burning, nothing more. Tonight the glow seemed stronger, and then she heard it. A woman's voice, low, cultured, shaped by Paris. Eloise's fingers tightened around the handle of the jug. Madame Camille, the prince's companion, his rumored fiancée, the woman whose gowns left powder on the backs of chairs and whose perfume lingered in the corridors long after she had passed. What is she doing here? Eloise's heart began to beat faster. She took another step very slowly. The voices inside were clearer now, though the words reached her broken and muffled through the heavy door. "Must be done, you see that surely." The nurse's voice answered, thin and nervous. "But, Madame, His Highness said—" "His Highness is not here." Madame Camille's tone had no sharpness, but it carried a weight that made Eloise's stomach tighten. "He travels the provinces. He does not see what I see. The risk grows with every day that child remains here. But he is only a baby," the nurse whispered. "He sleeps, he eats, he exists," Camille cut in. "That is all it takes." Eloise swallowed. The jug of milk suddenly felt heavy. She had 2 choices. She could turn back, pretend she had heard nothing, and bring the milk later when the room was empty. That was what a sensible maid would do. That was what the housekeeper would tell her to do, what the major domo would expect. Or she could knock. Her hand was moving before she decided. She set the jug on a small side table, wiped her damp palms on her apron, and stepped forward. She did not knock. She pushed the door just enough to see. The nursery was not large. The cradle stood near the window, draped with a simple white cloth. Beside it, the nurse wrung her hands, her cap askew, and a little to the left, framed by the faint light of 2 candles, stood Madame Camille. She was in a dark gown, the color of late evening. Her dark hair shone where it was pinned. She looked like a painting Eloise had once dusted in the gallery. Calm, elegant, untouchable. Her hand rested on the edge of the cradle. Little Adrien gave a small, sleepy cry. Eloise's breath caught. Camille turned her head slightly. "Come in," she said. "You might as well. I imagine you have already heard more than you should." Eloise froze with 1 foot over the threshold. "Forgive me, madame," she stammered. "I brought the milk. I did not mean—" "To listen?" Camille's mouth curved, not quite into a smile. "No one ever means to listen in this house. Yet somehow everyone knows everything. Strange, is it not?" The nurse darted forward and tried to take Eloise by the arm. "Go back downstairs," she whispered urgently. "This is not your place." Eloise pulled her arm free. "I was told to bring the milk," she said a little more firmly. "For the baby." She glanced at the cradle. Adrien's tiny hand had pushed through the blanket. His fingers opened and closed slowly, searching for something they could not reach. Camille followed her gaze and drew the blanket higher. "The baby is well enough for the moment," she said, "though he will not be staying here much longer." The words dropped into the room like stones. The nurse made a small sound. "What do you mean, madame?" Eloise asked. Her voice shook. "The prince left instructions. He said the child was to remain at Villeneuve. He said... Camille lifted her hand again. The gesture was gentle and absolute. The prince, she said, left many instructions. Some of them were wise, some were sentimental. She moved away from the cradle and crossed to a small table. Papers lay there, spread out and pinned with the weight of an inkstand. His Highness is a good man, she went on. He believes that good intentions can tame ugly truths. It makes him beloved. It also makes him vulnerable. He sees this child as a duty, perhaps even a penance for the mistakes of his family. He does not see what others will see. Eloise dared one step into the room. What will others see, madam? She asked quietly. Camille's eyes met hers. They were not unkind, they were not warm either. They were like glass, clear and hard. They will see an inconvenient possibility, she said, a story that can be twisted in many directions, a shadow that might grow longer than it should. She tapped the papers. This little boy, who should have been born in a palace, was born in secrecy instead. His father is dead, his mother is gone, and the law already groans under the weight of rumors. If certain enemies of the crown wish to stir trouble in future, they need only point to a child hidden in a remote chateau and call him the true heir. She said it in an even voice, as if reciting a recipe. The nurse shook her head, tears bright in her eyes. No one here would speak so, madame, she said. We are loyal. Perhaps, Camille replied, but loyalty cracks under hunger, under fear, under the promise of reward. She lifted one of the papers and looked at it briefly. Right now the child is nothing, barely a name. That is the only safety he has. If we pretend he is more, if we wrap him in secrets and importance, we are handing future troublemakers a weapon. The word hung in the air. Eloise flinched at it, though she knew Camille spoke in symbols, not of iron and powder. You cannot speak of him as nothing, Eloise said, before she could stop herself. He is a baby. He is someone. He breathes. He smiles. Camille regarded her with new attention. What is your name? She asked. Eloise, madame. You have been here. How long? 6 months. Ah, then you have had just enough time to forget your place. The nurse whispered, Please, mademoiselle, do not anger her. But Eloise could not move her tongue back into silence. I know my place, she said, though her knees felt unsteady. I know also that the prince trusted this house. He trusted us. We all heard him say the child was to be safe here. And he will be safe, Camille answered. Just not here. She set the paper down. Her ring tapped lightly against the table. There is a family some leagues from here, she continued, speaking now as if she were detailing a plan for rearranging furniture. People of modest means, but sufficient respectability. They will receive a generous allowance in exchange for raising a foundling with no questions asked. The child will have a warm bed, a full plate, and a chance at an ordinary life. He will grow as any village boy grows. No rumors, no whispers, no dangerous hopes. That is not what the prince wished, Eloise said. Camille's eyes sharpened. The prince wished to shield the child, she replied. I am doing exactly that. I am rescuing him from a life as a pawn. Do you imagine it is kindness to raise him in a house that will never name him properly? To let him grow up between two worlds, hearing his name used in corridors and never spoken openly in salons? She moved closer to Eloise. Do you imagine it is kindness to keep him in a place where every visitor might notice the line of his jaw and murmur, Does he not resemble someone we knew? The nurse sank into a chair, pressing a handkerchief to her mouth. But we could still care for him, she said faintly, quietly, as we have been doing. And what of the future? Camille asked. What of when His Highness takes a wife, has children of his own, and this boy is no longer a secret but a complication? Will you ask him then to choose between duty and affection, to live under constant suspicion that every act of kindness toward this child is a sign of secret favoritism? Her voice softened. I care enough for Louis not to let that happen. Eloise stared at her. You care for the prince, she said slowly, by going against his word? Camille smiled at last. It did not reach her eyes. I care for him by doing what he cannot bear to do, she said. He has the heart of a man who wishes to repair what others have broken. That is admirable. It is not always useful. She straightened. The carriage will come before dawn, she added. The boy will be gone by morning. A note will be sent to His Highness explaining that the physician insisted on specialized care. I will smooth the matter with the minister. Everyone will call it a pity and then forget it. You will say nothing. You will do nothing. You will continue to brighten the silver and scrub the floors and smile when addressed. That is all. Eloise felt as if someone had pressed a cold hand against her chest. You cannot, she whispered. Madame, you cannot simply take him away. He will never know who he is. He will never know. Many people do not know who they are, Camille replied. And still they live, marry, raise children. They do not start wars. Eloise took another step toward the cradle. Little Adrien had fallen quiet. His tiny hand curled under his chin. His lashes were dark against his pale cheeks. Nothing about him suggested danger or scandal or politics. He was simply small and alive. You speak as if he were a threat, Eloise said. He is not. He is just a baby. And yet, Camille said softly, if he remains, he might one day become the excuse for very dangerous men to do very foolish things. She looked at Eloise again. You are young, she added. Your heart is tender. You see the child. I see the world he will be thrown into. There is a difference. Eloise's hands began to tremble. Madame, please, she said. When the prince returns, he can decide. Let him decide. It is his family, his brother's child. If he chooses as you do, then so be it. But do not take that choice from him. The choice will be easier if the matter is already settled, Camille answered. He will be angry. He will suffer for a time. But he will see reason. Eventually. If you are so certain, Eloise said quietly, why do you fear his anger? A faint flush touched Camille's cheeks. Her hand rose and lowered again. You forget to whom you speak, she said. Eloise swallowed hard. Forgive me, madame, she said. But I was in the corridor when the prince left. I heard him say the baby would stay here. I cannot pretend I did not hear it. I cannot bring milk tonight and act as if nothing has changed. I cannot look at that cradle tomorrow and wonder where he has gone. Her voice broke. I cannot do it. The room seemed to draw in around them, the corners pulling closer. The nurse whispered, Eloise, think of your position, your wages, your family at home. They will not benefit from money that came because I stayed silent, Eloise replied, more to herself than to anyone else. Camille studied her for a long moment. Your parents are peasants? She asked. Yes, madame. Do they own land? A little. Brothers, sisters? 3 younger, Eloise said. 2 girls, 1 boy. Camille nodded slowly, as if she were examining a ledger. If you lose your position here, she said, they will ask why. You will not be able to tell them. You will say some foolish thing in a letter that will never reach them, because the housekeeper will quietly remove it from the post. Your sisters will marry badly. Your brother will take to drink. They will blame you in their hearts, though they will never say it. She stepped closer. Is that worth risking? She asked softly. For a child who will never know your name? Eloise's throat tightened with the effort not to cry. It is not about my name, she said. It is about his. There is no name, Camille replied. That is the point. There is only a problem to be moved from one place to another. She turned back to the table. This discussion is finished, she said. Eloise took a breath. No, she said. It came out as a gasp. She tried again. No, madame, it is not. Camille stilled. The nurse grabbed Eloise's sleeve. Do not, she whispered. Please, she will ruin you. I cannot let them take him without the prince knowing, Eloise said, tears rising now. I cannot, it would be wrong. Camille turned slowly. There was no warmth in her face now, no humor, no pretense of patience, only a cool, tired annoyance. You speak of right and wrong as if they were simple, she said. They are not. They are always tangled with necessity. Her gaze swept Eloise from head to foot. You are a maid, she went on. You sweep ashes, you carry trays, you open and shut doors. You have been given the honor of assisting in the care of this child, but that does not make you his guardian. It does not make you the prince's conscience. Eloise's heart pounded in her ears. Someone must be, she said softly. Camille's eyes narrowed. I see, she murmured. You have a taste for drama, for martyrdom. She took a step closer, close enough now that Eloise could see the faint line at the corner of her mouth. Let me be very clear, she said in a low voice. If you repeat a single word of what you have heard tonight, I will see you dismissed from this house before the week is out. You will receive no letter of character. The next place you serve, if you find one, will be far less forgiving. Perhaps a city inn where gentlemen do not bother to learn the maids' names." She paused. "Or perhaps you will not find any place at all." The nurse had begun to cry quietly. "Madam, she is young," she said. "She does not understand the world. Spare her." "I am trying to," Camille replied. She looked back at Eloise. "Do you understand me?" Eloise wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "If I stay silent," she said, "I will not be able to look at him, or at myself." "You will not have to," Camille answered. "He will be gone." That simple certainty broke something in Eloise. Words left her before she had time to weigh them. "Please," she whispered, "please do not do this." The plea hung in the room, bare and helpless. Camille's face did not soften. "Go," she said. "Take your milk with you. There is no need for it now." Eloise did not move. "Madame," she said, her voice shaking, "I beg you, wait for the prince. Give him the choice. You say you care for him, then trust him." Camille's eyes flashed just briefly. "This is the last time I repeat myself," she said. "Leave. If you remain, I will not forget it." The nurse rose and tried again to pull Eloise toward the door. "Please," she whispered, "do not throw your life away for this. There is nothing you can do." Eloise let herself be guided backward, step by slow step. Her gaze never left the cradle. Adrien did not move. He lay there unaware that people were arguing over the shape of his future. At the threshold, Eloise stopped once more. Her hand touched the doorframe. "Madame," she said quietly, "if the prince asks me what happened tonight, I will not lie." "If the prince asks," Camille said, "I will answer before you. And I will say that you were overcome with foolish emotion, that you imagined half of what you heard and misunderstood the rest. And he will believe me, because he knows me, and you are only a maid with red eyes and shaking hands." She tilted her head slightly. "Think carefully before you decide which story you wish to live with." For a moment, the room was so silent that Eloise could hear the small ticking of the clock on the mantel. Then the nurse pushed the door gently but firmly. Eloise found herself in the corridor again. The wood was cool beneath her palm. The door closed with a soft click. A second later, she heard the bolt slide into place. She leaned her forehead against the panel, breathing hard, fighting the urge to hammer on the door until someone listened. Inside, she could no longer hear voices, only a faint rustle, the movement of cloth, the suggestion of quiet activity. She imagined Camille lifting Adrien, imagined the baby's weight in those careful hands, imagined papers being folded and slipped into a leather case. "I cannot allow it," Eloise whispered to the empty corridor. "I cannot." The jug of milk still stood on the small table where she had left it. A thin skin had formed on the surface. She stared at it as if it might offer some guidance. The house felt vast around her. Somewhere in the distance, a door shut. Footsteps passed on a far floor. The world went on as if nothing were happening in this small, locked room at the end of a forgotten corridor. She pressed her palms to the door again, helpless. What can I do? Tell someone, but whom? The housekeeper would scold her, tell her to think of her place. The major domo would remind her that royal matters did not concern her. The other maids would gape, then panic, then beg her to keep silent so that her trouble did not become theirs. Louis is not here, she thought. The one person who might stop this is not here. Her throat ached. "Please," she whispered again, though now no one could hear her. "Please do not do this." Only the wind answered, pushing softly at the shutters. She stayed there longer than she should, until her legs began to ache and her fingers went numb against the wood. At last, she straightened, took the jug, and forced herself back down the corridor. On the stairs, the cold stone bit through her thin shoes. The air smelled faintly of ash and soap. Somewhere someone laughed, unaware. Eloise moved in a daze. When she reached the landing that overlooked the front courtyard, she paused and looked out through the narrow window, more from habit than intention. The night was deep. The sky hung low and clouded. The gravel sweep was a pale ribbon in the darkness. And there, from beyond the outer gate, she heard it, the distant sound of carriage wheels grinding over the stones, a carriage that should not be arriving at this hour. Eloise stood at the window, unable to move. The sound grew clearer. Iron rims over stone, slow and sure. The outer gate creaked faintly. A lantern bobbed in the darkness. She could not see the carriage well from this narrow slit of glass, only a blur and a glow and the suggestion of movement. No carriages were expected tonight. Everyone knew the household plans. The prince was away. Guests were not due. Deliveries did not come at such an hour. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "That is for him," she whispered. "It must be." The carriage rolled into the courtyard and stopped. She saw a figure climb down from the box, another from inside. A man in a heavy coat spoke to the footman on duty. The lanterns swung again. The front doors opened. For an instant, Eloise thought of running down, bursting into the hall, demanding answers. And then she imagined Camille's face. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the milk jug until it bit into her skin. "What would I say?" she murmured. "What could I say that anyone would hear?" She stood there until the doors closed and the courtyard emptied again. The carriage remained, a dark shape against darker shadows. She turned away at last and went down to the kitchens, moving like someone in a dream. The cook took one look at the untouched milk and snapped, "Too late now, girl. That will go to the cats. Where have you been?" "In the north wing," Eloise said, setting the jug down. "With the nursery." "Such a fuss over one child," the cook muttered, already reaching for another pot. "We did not stop the household for every brat in the old days." Eloise did not answer. Her mouth felt dry. She helped scrub the pans, put away the last of the plates, followed orders without hearing them. Her mind stayed upstairs, pressed against a locked door. By the time she crawled into her narrow bed in the attic room she shared with two other maids, dawn was already nudging at the roof tiles. Sleep did not come. When she closed her eyes, she saw Camille lifting the baby, saw the carriage in the courtyard, heard again the steady voice saying, "The boy will be gone by morning." She lay on her side, fists tucked under her chin, listening to the sounds of the house waking. The far ring of a bell, the thump of boots in distant corridors, the rush of water. Finally, she threw back the thin blanket. "I must see him," she whispered. "Perhaps I am wrong. Perhaps they changed their minds." The thought was ridiculous, but it was the only one that let her feet touch the floor. She dressed quickly and slipped out, careful not to wake the other girls. The stairs were cold under her bare hands as she climbed. The corridor to the nursery seemed longer than the night before. The door stood slightly ajar. That, more than anything, made her heart leap. If he were gone, they would have shut everything up, surely, locked it, covered the cradle. Would they leave the door open if the room were empty? She pushed gently. The room smelled of starch and soap and candle wax. The curtains were half drawn. The cradle sat in its place, the blanket folded neatly inside. No baby. The emptiness struck her harder than a shout. She went straight to the cradle and touched the mattress. It was cool. No indent where a small body had lain. "Nurse," she called softly. "Madame Fournier?" The nurse stepped out from the adjoining small room where she kept her own narrow bed. Her eyes were swollen, her cap was crooked. She held a folded cloth in her hands and twisted it again and again. "Oh," she said when she saw Eloise. "You should not be here." "Where is he?" Eloise asked. Her voice cracked. "Where is Adrien?" The nurse flinched at the name. "Do not say it," she whispered. "Not now." "Where is he?" Eloise repeated. The nurse glanced at the door, then back at her. "You must listen," she said in a trembling rush. "What I tell you, you did not hear from me. I said nothing. You asked nothing. Do you understand? I only want to know whether he is safe." The nurse's hand went to her mouth, then dropped. "They came at dawn," she said. "A coachman, another man. They had papers. Madame Camille herself brought them. She woke me. She told me the boy had to be moved at once. She said the physician had given strict orders, something about the damp, the air, the danger of his lungs. She said the chateau was bad for him." "She lied," Eloise said. "I do not know what is truth and what is not," the nurse whispered. "I know only that I was told to wrap him warmly and kiss him goodbye, and I did it because I'm a coward, and I have a daughter who needs my wages." Tears spilled over and ran down her cheeks. "I wanted to shout," she went on, choking. "I wanted to hold him and refuse. But what could I do? They would have sent me away. Then who would speak softly to him on cold nights? Better I let him go, hoping he will find some kindness elsewhere, than I leave him here alone with no one at all." Eloise felt her knees weakening. "So he is gone," she said. The nurse nodded. "The carriage you heard," she added. "It was for him." Eloise gripped the edge of the cradle so hard her knuckles whitened. "Where did they take him?" she asked. "They did not say." "Did you not ask?" "I did," the nurse answered in a wretched voice. "Madame said a name, some town I did not catch. The coachman looked at me in a way that said I should not remember, even if I heard it clearly." She squeezed the cloth tighter. "They told me to pack a few of his things," she said. "I put in his little cap, the one with the crooked seam, and the rattle the prince gave him. The rest they will not miss. They told me to prepare the room for inspection later today. I'm to say he fell ill and was taken away under the doctor's orders." "By whose orders?" Eloise asked. "Who signed the papers?" The nurse swallowed. "I did not see a signature," she said. "I only saw Madame holding them and the seal of someone important. I am sorry. I was too frightened to look closer." Eloise straightened. "I will go to the housekeeper," she said, "or the major domo. They must know. They cannot let this happen without the prince's consent." The nurse caught her sleeve in both hands. "Do not, child," she said urgently. "You will ruin yourself. They will say you are hysterical. They will choose her word over yours." "Then I will write to the prince," Eloise said. "He must learn it from someone." "Letters can be lost," the nurse whispered, "or read, or twisted." "Then I will stand in the middle of the courtyard and shout," Eloise said, the words rising without plan. "I will shout until someone listens." The nurse stared at her, horrified. "They will send you away within the day," she said. "You will be blamed for everything, for upsetting the child, for inventing stories, for disrespect. Is that what you want?" "I want him back," Eloise said. Her voice shook but did not break. The nurse let her sleeve go. "I want that too," she said quietly. "But wanting does not bring him to this cradle." Eloise looked down at the neat blanket. She remembered his small hand curling around her finger, the way he had once startled at a thunderclap and then burrowed into her shoulder, the way his whole face lit when he recognized a familiar voice. She turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" the nurse asked. "To find someone who will listen," Eloise said. She walked out before her courage could drain away. The corridor felt different now. The air seemed thinner. The morning light that slanted through the high windows did not warm her. She went first to the housekeeper's room. Madame Lenoir sat at her desk, checking lists. Her grey hair was tightly coiled. Her pen scratched steadily across the paper. "Madame," Eloise said from the doorway, "may I speak with you?" The housekeeper did not look up. "You are early," she said. "The schedules have not changed. You are on the second-floor corridor today. The prince's rooms must be aired." "This is not about schedules," Eloise said. Madame Lenoir sighed and raised her head. Her eyes took in Eloise's pale face and swollen lids at once. "You have been crying," she said. "Already. What trouble have you managed to find before breakfast?" "Madame," Eloise said, ignoring the sting. "The baby, Adrien, he has been taken away." "Yes," the housekeeper replied. "I am aware." "You are aware," Eloise repeated, stunned. "You know? And you allow it?" Madame Lenoir's brows drew together. "Careful," she said. "You forget to whom you speak." "Forgive me," Eloise said, breathless. "But the prince said he was to remain here. I heard him. Madame Camille has gone against his order. She sent him away in the night, without his consent. Is that right, madame? Is that how things are done here?" The housekeeper laid her pen down with deliberate calm. "Close the door," she said. Eloise obeyed. Madame Lenoir folded her hands on the desk. "You are new," she said. "You have not yet learned that this house does not bend around your feelings. His Highness gave instructions, yes, but circumstances change. Doctors give advice. Privy councillors send letters. You and I are not consulted." "No doctor came," Eloise said quickly. "I was in the corridor. I heard no one. I saw no one. Only Madame Camille, speaking of taking him away because he is an inconvenience." "Watch your words," the housekeeper snapped. "You tread very near to impertinence." "They are the truth," Eloise insisted. "Madame, I beg you, we must send a message to the prince. We must let him know what has been done. He would never consent to having his brother's child taken without a word." Something flickered across Madame Lenoir's face at the phrase, "his brother's child," but it vanished quickly. "You think you understand matters far beyond you," she said. You do not know what the prince would or would not consent to in the privacy of his own mind. You know only what he says to comfort the staff. That is not the same thing. He spoke to the child, Eloise said. He held him. I saw him. He would not give him up so easily. Madame Lenoir's mouth tightened. This discussion is dangerous, she said. You have already overstepped. Madame Camille spoke to me this morning. She said you were in the nursery last night. She said you became agitated and distressed, upsetting the nurse and disturbing the baby's rest. Is that true? That is not what happened, Eloise said. I was calm. It was she who... Enough, the housekeeper said sharply. Madame Camille is future mistress of this house. You are a maid. If there is a conflict of accounts, whom do you imagine I will believe? She lied, Eloise whispered. Madame Lenoir stood. She was not tall, but authority seemed to add height to her. You will hold your tongue, she said. You will not speak of lies. You will not repeat your version of events to the other staff. You will not turn this house into a nest of gossip and hysteria. Do you understand? Eloise drew herself up as straight as she could. No, she said quietly. I do not understand. A child was taken from this house in secret. I cannot pretend it is nothing. The housekeeper's eyes cooled. Very well, she said. If you cannot control yourself, I will help you. She seated herself again, took up her pen and made a small mark on the paper. You are reassigned, she said. You will no longer assist in the nursery. You will work in the scullery and on the ground floor corridors until further notice. The majordomo will be informed that your temperament is unsuited to delicate duties. Eloise stared at her. You punish me, she said. For caring? I protect this house, Madame Lenoir said. That is my duty. You would do better to remember yours. Will you send word to the prince? Eloise asked one last time. The housekeeper did not look up. Go to your work, she said. There was nothing more to say. Eloise left the room, her ears ringing. In the passage, other maids passed her, arms full of linens, faces already flushed with the day's tasks. What did she want? One whispered to another, glancing at Eloise's expression. Trouble, the other replied under her breath. By midday, the gossip had spread. In the laundry room, two girls bent over a tub talked in low voices. They say she argued with Madame Camille in the nursery, one said. In the nursery? The other murmured. With the child there? They say she raised her voice so high the baby cried, the first replied. Imagine, scolding the prince's lady like a fishwife. Eloise set a basket of sheets down nearby. That is not what happened, she said. They jumped, then looked at her with wide eyes. We did not mean, one began. Of course not, Eloise said. You only repeat what you hear. She carried the empty basket out again, her back stiff. All afternoon it was the same. Whispers died when she entered a room. People watched her with cautious curiosity, like a pot that might boil over at any moment. Some avoided her altogether. Others tried to be kind but could not hide their fear of being seen standing too close. In the late afternoon, as the sun slid toward the horizon, a bell rang to summon the household staff to the servants' hall. This was unusual. Eloise wiped her hands on her apron and joined the stream of maids, footmen and stable boys moving toward the long, low room. Madame Lenoir stood at one end. Beside her the majordomo, Monsieur Vallon, straight and stiff in his dark coat. A cluster of junior clerks hovered behind them, holding ledgers. There was a murmur as everyone found a place. What is this about? Someone whispered. Perhaps a new regulation, someone else replied. The room fell silent when another figure entered. Madame Camille. She wore a gown of subdued color, as if she had covered joy carefully away. A simple ribbon at her throat, no sparkling jewels. Her dark hair was smooth, her expression composed. Madame, the majordomo said respectfully, bowing. She inclined her head and turned to face the gathered staff. Thank you all for coming, she said, her voice carried without effort. I will not keep you long. There is a matter that touches the whole house, and it is better spoken of at once than left to grow in uncontrolled whispers. Eloise's stomach twisted. Camille folded her hands lightly. You are aware, she went on, that a certain child has been in our care these past months. Many of you assisted in small ways with his comfort. For that, His Highness was grateful, and I am as well. She paused, letting her gaze move gently over their faces. Unfortunately, she said, the child's health has never been strong. In recent weeks it worsened. On the advice of a physician consulted by the family, it was decided that he should be moved to a place more suited to his particular needs. The air here does not favor him. The damp stone, the cold. It was a difficult decision, but a necessary one. A murmur ran through the room. Some servants nodded, relieved to have a reason, any reason, placed neatly before them. Eloise felt her hands clench. Camille continued. "I know how quickly stories can spread in a house such as this," she said. "I know as well that affection can sometimes cloud judgment. There has been some disturbance related to this matter, a few unhelpful words spoken, some distress." Her eyes brushed past Eloise and then returned, resting on her with poised certainty. "It is natural to be sad when a child leaves," Camille said, "but it is not helpful to indulge in fantasies or accusations." One of the younger maids allowed her emotions to overtake her. She frightened the nurse. She disturbed the child. She imagined intentions that were not there. "We must be kind, but we must also be clear. Such behavior will not be tolerated. His Highness would be deeply pained to hear that his household was plagued by gossip." There was a tense silence. Monsieur Vallon cleared his throat. "Madame speaks wisely," he said. "We serve at the pleasure of the prince. Our opinions about private matters are of no importance. What is required of us is discretion and obedience." A few people murmured assent. Eloise could feel heat creeping up her neck. Camille's gaze did not leave her. "I will not name the maid," she said, "for I believe in mercy, and I hope she will learn from this. But let it be understood, the prince trusts this house. When he returns, he must find it calm and loyal, not full of discontent. If anyone has questions or fears, they should bring them to the proper authorities, not whisper them over buckets and brooms." She let that sink in. Then she added, with a gentle sadness that almost sounded sincere, "We must hope for the child's recovery and pray for his comfort. That is all." Madame Lenoir nodded sharply. "You have heard, Madame Camille," she said to the hall. "Return to your duties. Remember your place." People began to disperse, buzzing softly. A footman beside Eloise murmured to another, "Who do you suppose she meant? Which maid?" The other gave a tiny shrug and, glancing at Eloise's rigid face, did not answer aloud. Eloise did not move. Her legs felt rooted to the floor. Madame Camille stepped down from the small platform at the front of the room and crossed the space with unhurried grace. She stopped a short distance from Eloise. "Child," she said, her voice low enough not to carry far, "you have had your warning. Do not force me to go further." "You sent him away," Eloise said in a hoarse whisper. "You speak of mercy, but you took his name." Camille's eyes chilled. "I preserved far more than I took," she said. "He will live. He will be loved in his own way. That is more than some children receive." "Not as who he is," Eloise said. "And who is he?" Camille asked softly. "Can you answer that? Can anyone without dragging a dead man's mistakes into every drawing room in France?" She shook her head. "Enough. For your own sake, swallow this and let it pass." She turned away. Madame Lenoir appeared at Eloise's elbow. "You heard her," the housekeeper said under her breath. "Do not test her patience. It will not end well for you." "I have already lost what mattered," Eloise replied. Madame Lenoir's face softened. "Just a fraction." "Not yet," she said. "You still have your place, your wages, your roof. Do not throw them away for something you cannot change." "I might change it," Eloise said, "if the prince knew." Madame Lenoir closed her eyes briefly as if in pain. "Do your work," she said. "That is all you can do." She moved off, calling instructions to the others. The servants' hall emptied little by little. Eloise stood alone near the back wall, her hands hanging uselessly by her sides. "What can I do now?" she thought. "To whom can I appeal when everyone kneels to her words?" She thought of her parents, of the letters she sent home every few weeks. She imagined writing, "They took a baby from this house, and I could not stop them." She imagined her mother's worried face, her father's slow shake of the head. "You spoke out again, did you?" he would say in her mind. "You spoke as if the great folk would listen." Her chest ached. A scullery maid brushed past her. "Come," the girl whispered kindly. "They will scold you again if you stand idle. The supper trays will not carry themselves." Eloise nodded numbly and followed her back toward the kitchens. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of plates, pans, and shouted orders. The cook snapped when she moved too slowly. A senior maid corrected the angle of the knives on the sideboard with impatient clicks of her tongue. By evening, Eloise's feet hurt and her back throbbed, but the tiredness did not dull the sharpness inside her. As the servants were clearing the remains of the gentleman's supper, a commotion sounded near the main corridor. A footman stepped into the kitchen, a little breathless. "They are calling us again," he said. "Back to the hall." The cook frowned. "What now?" she muttered. The staff gathered once more, this time the room filled with a different energy, sharp and curious. Monsieur Vallon stood at the front again, holding a sealed envelope. The wax was dark red, stamped with a familiar crest. Near him, Madame Lenoir looked unusually grave. "What is happening?" someone whispered behind Eloise. "A messenger arrived," another answered. "Horse all in lather, straight from His Highness, they say." Monsieur Vallon lifted his hand for silence. "This concerns you all," he said, "and so with Madame Camille's permission I will read it aloud." Camille stood to one side, her face smooth, her hands folded. Only the slightest tightening at the corner of her mouth betrayed any unease. The majordomo broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The hall seemed to lean forward. He cleared his throat and began to read, his voice carrying to every corner. "To the household of Villeneuve, my journey has been shortened, and my business in the provinces concluded sooner than anticipated. You will therefore prepare the chateau for my arrival without delay. I leave at once and expect to reach Villeneuve within 2 days of this letter. Until then, you will keep the house in good order and avoid any disturbance that might trouble the peace of my return. Signed, Louis, Prince of Orléans." For a moment after the majordomo finished reading, no one spoke. The words hung in the air like a sudden change in weather. 2 days. The staff looked at one another, then at Madame Camille. Her smile appeared with practiced ease. "You hear?" she said lightly. "His Highness comes home sooner than we thought. He will be tired and in need of comfort, not turmoil. Let us show him that Villeneuve is as orderly as he left it." A hum of nervous energy stirred through the hall. Monsieur Vallon clapped his hands once. "You heard, madame," he said. "Floors, windows, silver, guest rooms. Everything must shine. The prince favors no dust." The servants scattered, talking in low, excited voices as they went. "He returns in 2 days," a footman said. "Less, perhaps, if the roads are good," another answered. In the doorway, Eloise stood still. Her mind was already racing ahead. 2 days. He will be here in 2 days. If I can speak to him, if I can look him in the eye. She tried to imagine the moment, but could not see beyond Camille's shadow. The woman herself moved past Eloise with the same graceful step as always, but as she drew near, she paused just long enough to lay a hand on the girl's arm. "Remember," Camille said softly, so no one else could hear. "I asked for no disturbances." Her fingers tightened briefly, then released. "I keep my promises," she added, "both the pleasant ones and the other kind." Eloise felt chilled. She did not answer. There was nothing to say that would not be twisted. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Curtains were shaken, carpets beaten, fires laid. Beds were remade with fresh linens and lavender. Candles were polished free of dust. The prince's suite was opened and aired, the windows cracked to let in cold, sharp air. Eloise spent most of her time on the ground floor corridors as ordered, scrubbing stone steps and polishing banisters until her wrists ached. "Mind the corners," the senior maid told her. "He notices everything." As she worked, she listened. Everywhere people spoke of the prince. "He will be fair," one maid said in the pantry, stacking plates. "He always is. He will ask after the child, and Madame will tell him what the doctor said, and that will be that." "He will be too tired to ask much," a footman replied. "Travel is no pleasure in this weather." "Do you think he knows already?" another asked. "About the baby?" "They say the minister wrote to him," someone murmured. "They say all this was arranged days ago." Eloise clenched her jaw. They say. Always nameless, always just out of reach. Late on the second evening, the sky turned heavy and low. Lamps were lit early. The smell of damp cloaks and horses drifted in from the stables. The call came suddenly. "His Highness approaches!" The cry ran through the house, repeated on staircases and in corridors. Eloise, kneeling in a side passage with a bucket and cloth, froze. "Already?" She stood and wiped her hands on her apron, heart pounding. Through a crack in the door to the main hall, she saw the front doors swing open. The prince stepped in from the cold. He was not in full court dress. only a travel-stained coat and boots dusted with mud. His dark hair was tousled by the wind, but he carried himself with the easy authority of someone who had always been listened to. A footman took his gloves, another reached for his coat. He waved them off with a tired smile. "Later," he said. "Let me greet my own house first." Madame Camille came forward, composed and lovely. "Louis," she said, her voice warm. He smiled and reached for her hands. "Camille," he replied. "You look well. Villeneuve suits you." "And you look exhausted," she answered. "The road must have been dreadful. It was not kind," he admitted. "But it ended here, so I forgive it." He turned to the assembled staff. "My friends," he said, "I'm glad to see you all. You have kept my house standing, which is more than I can say for some of the inns I have stayed in." Polite laughter rippled through the servants. His gaze moved over them, one face after another. It lingered here and there, on Madame Lenoir, on Monsieur Vallon, on the cook with her flour-dusted apron. For the briefest moment, it brushed past the door where Eloise stood. Their eyes met. She dropped hers at once, but in that heartbeat, he seemed to note the redness around them, the strain in her posture. "Has all been well in my absence?" he asked. "Entirely, Highness," the majordomo said smoothly. "The house has been quiet. No incidents of note." Louis looked faintly amused. "Quiet," he said. "You must have grown dull without me." A few servants smiled. Camille had not taken her eyes off his face. "Come," she said gently. "You should sit. Supper is waiting. The rest can be discussed later." He nodded. "Yes, later." He let himself be guided into the grand salon, the door closing behind them. Eloise stepped back from the crack in the wood, as if burned. She pressed her back against the wall. "He is here," she whispered. "He is here now." It did not feel real. All that stood between her and the truth was a dozen doors, 100 rules, and one elegant woman. That night she slept hardly at all. In the morning, the household buzzed with new life. The prince walked through the rooms, asking questions, offering small thanks. In the stables, he spoke with the grooms about the horses' condition. In the kitchens, he complimented the bread. In the servants' hall, he asked after an old butler's gout. He moved like someone who saw more than he let on. Heloise kept herself small. She carried trays, fetched water, and slipped out of rooms before he entered them. Her courage, so clear in thought, faltered when faced with his actual presence. "If I speak," she thought again and again, "it will be before her. Before everyone, she will crush me." By the third day, she still had not found a moment. Camille, however, had. In the late afternoon, when the sun was little more than pale light behind clouds, a quiet conversation began in the small drawing room off the prince's library. Louis sat near the fire, a cup of coffee in his hand. "The provinces are restless," he said. "The people are always restless, but they are no worse than usual. It is the ministers who worry, not the farmers." Camille listened with her knees angled elegantly to one side. "And you?" she asked. "Do you worry?" "I worry that I spent too much time in bad inns and not enough at Villeneuve," he replied with a faint smile. "It is more peaceful here." She hesitated, then spoke. "Peaceful, perhaps," she said, "but not without sorrow." He looked at her more closely. "Ah," he said. "You mean the child?" She lowered her eyes. "I wished to tell you at once," she said softly. "But I did not want to burden your mind while you were traveling." "Tell me now," he said. "All of it." She sighed as if the words pained her. "He grew ill," she said, "shortly after you left. It began with something small, a cough, a weakness in his cries. The nurse was concerned. We called a physician from the neighboring town. He examined the child and said the air here did not suit him, that the stone walls and the damp were dangerous for such fragile lungs." Louis frowned. "What physician?" he asked. "Dr. Martin," she answered promptly. "You may remember him from the estate accounts. He has attended some of the tenant families." He nodded slowly. "I recall the name. He said the child must be moved," Camille continued, "somewhere higher, drier, where he could breathe more easily. He knew of a small establishment run by good people, accustomed to such cases. I did not want to act without your consent, but he insisted time was precious." She folded her hands tightly. "I feared for the child," she said. "I sent him away in care with the doctor's escort and full funding from the household. I wrote to the minister. so the matter would be properly recorded. I planned to tell you as soon as you returned, but you arrived sooner than I expected." She looked up, eyes glossy but dry. "I hoped you would see that I acted only for his safety," she finished. Louis was silent a moment. "The nurse agrees with this account?" he asked. Camille inclined her head. "She was frightened for him," she said. "She did what the doctor advised." "And the housekeeper?" he asked. "She knows everything of the practical arrangements," Camille replied. "I did not wish to spread details through the entire household. It would have fed idle tongues. But those whose duties touched the child have been informed as much as necessary." He studied her. "You do not think they will talk?" he asked quietly. "Some already have," she admitted. "There was a little unnecessary agitation. One of the younger maids allowed her imagination to run wild. She frightened the nurse, saying the child should not be moved, that it betrayed your trust. She hinted at things she could not possibly understand." "Which maid?" he asked sharply. She dipped her head as if embarrassed. "It does not matter," she said. "She is young. The housekeeper has reassigned her. It will settle. It matters to me," he said. "If someone in this house believes a wrong has been done, I wish to know why." Camille hesitated the slightest fraction of a second. "Her name is Eloise," she said at last. "One of the newer maids. She helped in the nursery for a time. The child's departure upset her. I am sure she will recover her sense soon enough." Louis leaned back in his chair. "Eloise," he repeated under his breath. He remembered the frightened eyes glimpsed in the doorway on the night of his arrival. "Bring me the accounts from the neighboring town," he said suddenly, "and the physician's report. I would like to see where my nephew sleeps now." Camille's fingers tightened. "Of course," she said. "I will ask the steward to assemble everything." She smiled. "You will see that all was done correctly," she added. "I hope so," he said. Later that evening, in the steward's cramped office, there was confusion. "No fee has been recorded for Dr. Martin," the steward said, flipping through ledgers. "Not recently. The last entry is months old, for some childbirth among the tenants." Madame Lenoir, who had been summoned to advise, frowned. "Perhaps the account has not yet been entered," she suggested. "The journey was only a few days ago." "And the sanatorium?" Louis asked. "Its name, its location?" The steward shifted uncomfortably. "I do not have it, Highness." "You paid no deposit?" Louis asked. "No, Highness," the man admitted. "I was told Madame Camille had taken care of those arrangements privately." Louis looked from one face to another. Madame Lenoir's eyes slid away. "You saw the doctor?" he asked her. "With your own eyes?" She hesitated. "The nurse assured me she had consulted him," she said. "That is not what I asked," he replied quietly. She swallowed. "No, Highness," she said. "I did not see him myself." Louis dismissed them with a brief nod. As the door closed behind them, he stood alone in the office, hands pressed flat on the desk. "There are holes," he thought. "Too many holes." He thought of Camille's calm voice, her precise answers. He thought of the steward's confusion, the missing accounts. He thought of a young maid whose eyes had looked as if she carried a weight too heavy for her shoulders. He left the office and went in search of Madame Bernard. He found her in a small sewing room near the back of the house, mending curtains by lamplight. "Madame Bernard?" he said from the doorway. She looked up at once and struggled to rise, her fingers clumsy on the thread. "Highness," she said, bobbing an awkward curtsy. "Forgive me, I did not expect—" "Sit," he said gently. "My presence should not tear your seams." She half laughed, half choked, and eased back onto her chair. "How may I serve your Highness?" she asked. "You have served this house longer than most," he said. "You knew my father, my brother." "Yes, Highness," she said softly. "I remember both of them as boys, shouting in these corridors, sliding on the tapestries." A sad smile touched her mouth. The late Duke scolded them until his voice broke. "And you have known Adrian?" Louis continued, tasting the name. Her hands stilled. "Yes, Highness," she said. "I have known the child." "I wish you to tell me," he said, "anything you know of his birth. Anything at all. I give you my word, nothing you say will be used to harm you." She stared at him, torn. "Highness, there are things I was never meant to speak of," she whispered. "Perhaps they should have been spoken long ago," he replied. Silence stretched. At last she sighed. "I am an old woman," she said. "Secrets weigh more heavily on old bones." She looked up at him. eyes bright with unshed tears. "The child is your brother's son," she said simply. "The late prince's. He was born to a young woman of good but not noble family, someone your brother cared for deeply, though he could not marry her without scandal. They thought to manage it quietly. A small house, an attendant, arrangements. Then your brother fell ill. He died before everything was settled." Louis listened, jaw clenched. "After his death," Madame Bernard continued, "the child became a problem no one wanted to name. To acknowledge him openly would have caused questions. To deny him entirely would have been cruel. The compromise was Villeneuve, a place close enough to the family to feel like a kind of belonging, yet far enough to pretend he did not exist if the right people asked." She shook her head. "Some servants know more than they should," she said. "Some know less. The minister knows enough to be afraid. The court knows only rumors. But I, Highness, I have seen that little boy laugh. I have held his hand. He is no rumor." Louis's throat worked. "Does Camille know this?" he asked. "She suspects," Madame Bernard said. "Or perhaps she knows outright. Women like her do not live in houses without learning their corners. Does she know that I know?" he asked. "I do not," Madame Bernard said. "Do you know, Highness?" He let out a breath. "I know enough now," he said. "She believes she protects you," Madame Bernard said after a moment. "She would say as much. She fears that, one day, someone will stand in a crowded street and shout that a hidden boy has a better claim to something than the man who wears the crown. She fears they will use him to pull you down." "And you?" he asked. "What do you fear?" "I fear a child growing up thinking he is nobody," she said softly. "When his blood sings louder than most men's." She looked at her hands. "I do not know what the right answer is," she admitted. "I am only sure that sending him away without your knowledge was not it." Louis nodded slowly. "Has anyone tried to tell me this?" he asked. "To speak against what has been done?" She hesitated. "The nurse is frightened," she said. "She has a daughter. She clings to her wages. The housekeeper guards her position. Most servants think of their own skins first." Her gaze lifted. "There is one girl," she said. "The new one. Eloise. She asked questions she should not. She wept when she heard the carriage leave. She said someone must tell you." A spark lit in Louis's eyes. "And no one thought to bring her to me?" he asked. Madame Bernard looked apologetic. "Highness, she is a maid. People do not take maids' worries into councils of state." "Then perhaps they should," he said. He left her with a quiet word of thanks and went back into the corridor. The house seemed to hum around him, unaware that anything had shifted. He walked, not entirely sure where his feet were taking him, until he found himself in the north wing. The corridor was narrow and cool. At the far end stood the door of the empty nursery. Fresh flowers rested in a chipped vase on the floor by the door, a small, stubborn offering. Heloise knelt beside them, rearranging the stems with careful fingers. She started when she heard footsteps and turned quickly. Seeing him, she scrambled to her feet, nearly knocking the vase over. "Highness," she gasped. "Forgive me, I did not know—" "It is all right," he said. "You are not in my way." Her hands fluttered at her sides, searching for some task to make herself useful. I brought these," she said, nodding at the flowers. "The room looked so empty. I thought—" Her voice trailed off. He looked at the door, then at the flowers, then at her face. "You cared for him," he said quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "Very much. And you are the maid who objected to his removal," he added. Her cheeks flushed. "If they told you I was hysterical, Highness," she began hurriedly, "I swear it was not so. I spoke, yes, but I did not—" He raised a hand. "Eloise," he said. She fell silent at the sound of her name in his mouth. "For 3 days," he went on, "I have heard accounts of my nephew's departure. Some are neat, some are vague. None are complete. There are gaps where there should be answers. I have spoken to Madame Bernard. I have spoken to the housekeeper. I have listened to Camille." He took a small step closer. "Now," he said, "I wish to hear you." She stared at him, wide-eyed. "Me, Highness?" she said. "Yes," he replied. "You." He held her gaze. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "I beg you to tell me what truly happened that night with the child." For a few seconds Eloise could not breathe. The words he had spoken, so calmly, so directly, seemed to echo around them. "Mademoiselle," Louis repeated gently, "I wish to hear you. No one else. No one above you. Only you." Her first instinct was to look over her shoulder, to see whether someone stood there to stop her. The corridor was empty. Only the door of the nursery, the vase of simple flowers, the prince and herself. "Highness," she whispered, "if I speak, I will be contradicting Madame Camille. She will say I invent things. She has already said so." "I know what she has said," he replied. "I have heard her version, I have heard others. Now I want yours. When I have heard it, I will decide what to believe. That is my right. It is also my burden." His tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Eloise swallowed. "I do not know where to begin," she said. "Begin," he said quietly, "with the moment you first heard her voice behind that door." She stared at him, astonished. "How do you know that I—" "Because you listen more than you speak," he said simply. "Madame Bernard told me that much. And because this vase of flowers stands at the nursery door, not in the chapel, not in the garden, you are not very discreet in your devotion, mademoiselle." A faint, breathless laugh escaped her. "I tried to be," she said. "It seems I failed." "On this occasion," he answered, "I am grateful for your failure." He nodded toward a narrow bench beneath the window. "Sit," he said. "You are shaking." She hesitated. "I should not," she murmured. "It is not proper." "I give you leave," he said. The simple phrase carried an authority that left no room for protest. She sat, hands twisted together in her lap. He remained standing a short distance away, not looming but near enough that she could see his face clearly. "Tell me," he said. She took a breath. "I went to the nursery with the milk," she began, "as I always do in the evening. The corridor was quiet. Only there was more light under the door than usual, and I heard voices, the nurse, and Madame Camille." She swallowed again. "I did not mean to listen," she went on quickly, "but I heard my own name in her mouth and something in her tone made me afraid. So I opened the door a little. She saw me at once. She did not shout. She did not look flustered. She simply watched me. As if I were a chair someone had forgotten to move." His mouth tightened faintly, but he said nothing. "She told me," Eloise continued, "that the child would not be staying, that by morning a carriage would take him away and he would be given to a family in the country. A respectable family," she said. "They would raise him as a foundling. He would have food and shelter, and no one would ever whisper that he was anything more than that." Her fingers knotted more tightly. "She said it was for his safety," she whispered. "She spoke of enemies and rumors and people who might use him to harm you. She called him a problem to be moved from one place to another. She did not strike him. She did not raise her hand, but her words were—" She paused, searching. "They were like cold water poured over a flame. They meant to smother him without touching his skin." Louis's jaw clenched. "And you objected," he said. "Yes," she said. "I told her she could not do it, that you had said the baby was to stay at Villeneuve. I asked her to wait for you, to let you decide. She called your wish sentimental. She said you would see reason when it was done. She told me I did not understand the world." "What did you reply?" he asked. "I told her," Eloise said, her voice very low, "that someone must be your conscience when you are not here to speak for yourself." His eyes widened slightly. "You said that?" he asked. "Yes, Highness," she whispered. "It slipped out before I could stop it." She rushed on before he could answer. "She warned me," she said. "She said if I repeated anything I had heard, she would see me dismissed without a reference. She spoke of my family, my sisters, how they would suffer if I lost my wages. She made my fear into a rope around my own throat." "And still you argued," he said. "Only a little more," she admitted. "I begged her. I said those words, 'Please do not do this.' She did not heed them. She told me to leave. The nurse pulled me away. I heard the bolt slide after the door closed. Then later that night I heard the carriage." She told him the rest quickly. The morning discovery, the empty cradle, the nurse's tears, the conversation with Madame Lenoir, the humiliation in the servants' hall when Camille spoke of a hysterical maid, the way whispers followed her like shadows. When she finished, her throat was dry. "I know I have spoken too freely," she said, staring down at her hands. "You may think me insolent, but I could not keep it inside." Silence fell between them. When it stretched too long, she forced herself to look up. Louis was watching her with an expression she could not immediately read. There was anger in it, but not directed at her. There was sadness too, and something like relief. "Do you swear," he asked quietly, "that every word you have just told me is true?" She met his eyes steadily. "I swear it, Highness," she said. He nodded once. "Then we will test it," he said. "Not because I doubt you, but because truth deserves witnesses strong enough to stand against denial." He turned toward the nursery door and laid his hand briefly on the handle, then let it fall. "You have done what was hardest," he said. "You spoke when you had every reason to be silent. Now let me do my part." He took a step away, then stopped. "Eloise," he added, glancing back, "you will not be punished for this. Not while I have breath to prevent it." She stared at him in disbelief. "You mean—" she began. "I mean," he said, "that if anyone threatens you because you told me what you saw, they will answer to me, not the other way round." A small, choked sound escaped her. It might have been a laugh. It might have been the beginning of a sob. "Go to your duties," he said more gently. "Wait. It will not be long." He left her there with the flowers and the empty room and a heart that felt too large for her chest. He went first to the nurse. Madame Fournier sat in a small chamber just off the laundry, mending a tiny garment with clumsy fingers. When he appeared in the doorway, she jolted upright, dropping the needle. "Highness," she gasped, If I had known—" "You knew enough," he said, not unkindly. "You have known enough for days." She bowed her head, hands twisting in her apron. "Tell me," he said, "what happened the morning my nephew was taken from this house? And do not spare me for courtesy's sake." Her shoulders shook. "Highness, I was afraid," she said. "They came before dawn. Madame Camille, the coachman, another man. She told me the doctor insisted on the move. She said I would be responsible if the child grew sicker by remaining. She put the fear of failure in my throat like a stone." "Did you see the physician?" Louis asked. "No, Highness," she whispered. "No, I only had her word." "Did she name the place he was going?" he asked. "She spoke of some village," the nurse said. "Saint-Martin something. The rest I did not catch. My ears were full of my own heart." "You wrapped him," Louis said. "Yes," she choked. "I held him, I kissed him. I put his cap on and his little rattle in his bundle. He smiled at me, Highness. He thought it a game." Tears finally spilled over. "I let them take him," she whispered. "I did not shout. I did not claw at the door. I am a coward." "You are a mother," he said quietly. "You feared for your own child." She looked up, startled. "How did you—" "Madame Bernard told me," he said. "Fear does strange things to the bravest of us." He took a breath. "Tell me about the carriage," he said. "Which gate did it use? Which road did it take? What did the coachman look like?" Piece by piece, between sobs and pauses, she gave him small details. The man's red scarf, the notch in one wheel, the way the carriage had turned left at the fork instead of right, toward the main road. A comment from the coachman about bad ruts near Saint-Martin-de-Bellevue. It was enough. "In future," Louis said when she had finished, "if anyone asks you to take the blame for their decisions, send them to me." She nodded, bewildered. He left her and went to find Monsieur Vaillant. Within the hour, a trusted steward and a pair of senior footmen were on the road with precise instructions and a letter bearing the prince's seal. "There will be no argument," Louis said as he handed the steward the folded paper. "No raised voices. You will knock at the door of the house where my nephew lies. You will present this. You will offer compensation for any trouble, and then you will bring the child home." "Yes, Highness," the steward said. "You will be gentle," Louis added. "He has already been moved more than enough." The steward's lined face softened. "I raised 6 children under my own roof, Highness," he said. "I know how to lift a sleeping child." Louis clapped his shoulder once. "Go then," he said. The carriage rolled out through the same gate that had swallowed Adrian days before. Louis watched it until it disappeared down the road. Now there was one more task. He found Camille in the small salon arranging flowers in a porcelain vase. She looked up when he entered and smiled. "You have been busy," she said lightly. "The whole house looks as if it waits for a test." "It does," he said. "It has passed most of them. There is only one matter left." She tilted her head. "You sound like a magistrate," she teased. "Should I be afraid?" "Yes," he said, too gently for jest. Something in his tone made her set the flowers down. "What has happened?" she asked. "Has someone displeased you? If it is that girl again—" "It is not only that girl," he said, though we will speak of her. He closed the door behind him and moved a little further into the room. You told me, he said, that the child was moved on a doctor's advice. You named Dr. Martin. Yes, she said calmly. You know him. He is in the accounts. He is in the accounts, Louis agreed, but not recently. There is no record of any payment for his services in the last months. No entry for travel, no fee for consultation. She shrugged one shoulder. Perhaps the steward was slow, she said. These things happen. There is no letter from him either, Louis went on, to any sanatorium recommending my nephew into their care. There is no note from any such place acknowledging his arrival. There is, in fact, no record at all of the house where he now lies, almost as if it were chosen privately, without informing those whose signatures should appear on official papers. She smiled still, but it stiffened. Louis, she said, you know how slow clerks can be. The ink dries on the page long after events have passed. I spoke with the nurse, he said. She never saw the doctor. She saw you and 2 men and a carriage. She heard you speak the name of a village. It was not the place you told me. She said nothing. I spoke with Madame Bernard, he continued. She told me the truth about Adrian's birth. I suppose I should thank you. Your boldness forced from hiding what my family had tried to keep half-shaded. Louis, Camille said quietly, you know what that truth means. You know what it could mean. Yes, he said, I know. I know that he is my brother's son. I know that the law does not give him my place, but the blood does not entirely care what the law says. I know that one day ambitious men might use his existence to stir trouble, as you claimed. He looked at her, unblinking. What you seem not to know, he said, is that none of this gives you the right to move him like a piece on a board without telling me. Her chin lifted. I did what you did not have the strength to do, she said. I spared you the choice. If you had allowed him to remain here, you would have been accused of favoritism. If you had sent him away yourself, you would have been called cruel. This way you can discover the decision already taken and be the generous uncle who brings him back from exile if it suits you. Is that what you imagined? He asked. That I would be grateful for the chance to pretend this was not my responsibility. Yes, she said simply. I thought you would come to see it that way. He let out a slow breath. You know me very well in some things, he said, and not at all in others. She took a few steps toward him. Louis, she said softly, I have watched the council circle you like wolves. I have seen the way they look when your name is spoken in the capital. They overpraise you. They fear your popularity. They would seize on any pretext to weaken you. This child, this quiet little secret in a far-off chateau, could become exactly that pretext. Her voice grew more intense. I did not send him away to be harmed, she said. I chose a good house. Somewhere simple, with no sharp eyes. He will be loved as an ordinary boy. He will never feel the weight you carry now. I thought that was a kindness. You did not think of what it would be to grow up always knowing something was missing, Louis said. To hear whispers that never name you. To see a crest and feel your own blood stir and be told you were imagining it. He shook his head. Perhaps you did think of it, he added. Perhaps you thought that if he were far enough away, you would not have to watch it. Color rose in her cheeks. Is it so terrible, she said, to want our life to be simple, clean, without a ghost at the nursery door? The ghost was my brother, he replied, not his child. You would have taken that child into your arms, she said, and then into your heart. You would have been torn all your life between him and the sons you will one day have. I did not want to see you torn, and so you tore my trust instead, he said quietly. She flinched. You are angry, she whispered, but you will see that I was right. When you sit in council and no one can throw this child's name at you like a stone, I will sit there knowing that the woman beside me was willing to lie to me about my own flesh, he interrupted, that she was willing to threaten a servant girl into silence instead of bringing her concerns to me. Do you imagine that is a light thing? She stared at him. Eloise, she said slowly. So she spoke to you, after all. Yes, he said. And unlike you, she did not hide behind delicate phrases. She told me exactly what you said. She thought I would dismiss her as hysterical. Instead, I listened. You prefer the judgment of a maid, Camille said bitterly, to that of the woman who has stood beside you in salons and endured the stares and smiled through every whisper. I prefer the truth, he said. Silence fell. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. "What will you do?" she asked. "I have already sent for him," he said. "My nephew. He will return to Villeneuve as soon as a carriage can bring him. He will not be a rumor here any longer, at least not among those who serve this house." "And beyond this house," she pressed. He smiled without humor. "That," he said, "is a tangle for another day. But I will not base my decisions on fear alone." She straightened. "And me?" she asked. He hesitated, and the hesitation hurt her more than any quick answer might have done. "You are clever," he said quietly. "You are brave in your own way. You have stood with me in difficult rooms. I do not deny any of that." Her throat worked. "But," she whispered, "but I cannot build a life with someone who believes her love gives her the right to arrange my conscience for me," he said. "Nor with someone who looks at a child and sees only a future inconvenience." A faint, bitter smile touched her lips. "You think a princess can afford to look at children as anything else?" she asked. "I think," he answered, "that the woman I marry must be able to look at any child, legitimate, illegitimate, convenient, inconvenient, and see someone, not something." He took a breath that seemed to scrape his chest. "I release you, Camille," he said, "from whatever understanding existed between us. We will say, if you wish, that our paths diverged because of politics or personal incompatibility or 100 other polite fictions. You will not be shamed. You will not be publicly blamed. But you will not be mistress here." Her composure cracked at last. "You dismiss me," she said, "because of a maid's tears and a peasant child's blood." "I dismiss you," he said, "because you dismissed their worth." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "When will I leave?" she asked. "When you choose," he said. "Today, tomorrow, next week. You may arrange it as suits your dignity. I will not drag the household through a spectacle. But we both know there is no returning to what was." She gave a short, sharp nod. "That," she said, "at least is honest." She moved past him, then stopped. "You will regret this," she said quietly, not as a threat, but as a prediction. "Not today, perhaps. Not when the child smiles at you. But one day, when the council claws at you, you will wish you had allowed me to remove one weapon from their hands." "Perhaps," he said, "but I would rather meet them armed with a clear conscience than with hidden children and broken promises behind me." She looked at him one last time, something like sorrow in her gaze. "Goodbye, Louis," she said. "Goodbye, Camille," he answered. She left the room without further ceremony. Within 2 days, her trunks were packed. A modest carriage, without crest or fanfare, carried her away. The servants watched from discreet distances. No one quite understood why she went, only that she was no longer the future they had expected. "That is what happens," one footman whispered in the shadows of the courtyard, "when people fly too close to the sun." Madame Lenoir hushed him, but did not entirely disagree. The steward returned in the evening of the second day. The whole house seemed to hold its breath as the carriage rolled through the gate. Eloise stood behind a pillar in the main hall, fingers pressed to her lips. The door opened. The steward stepped in, weary but content. In his arms lay a small bundle wrapped in a familiar blanket. Adrien blinked at the sudden change of light. For a moment he seemed uncertain. Then the nurse stepped forward with a choked cry. "Mon petit," she whispered. At the sound of her voice, his face broke into a gummy smile. The nurse reached out, trembling. "May I, Highness?" she asked, eyes flying to Louis. "Yes," he said softly. "You may." She took the child and held him close, tears falling freely now. "I am sorry," she murmured into his hair. "I am so sorry." He patted her cheek and made a soft, questioning noise, as if to ask why she was wet. Louis watched, his expression clearing as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. "Welcome home, Adrien," he said under his breath. Whispers ran through the staff. "He is back," they said. "The baby is back." "It seems Madame Camille did not carry the day after all," someone else murmured. Monsieur Vallon straightened, already calculating how best to restore order to this new arrangement. Louis raised his hand for attention. "Listen to me," he said. "There has been confusion in this house. Some of it was not your fault. Some of it was. You heard partial stories and built whole ones from them. That is the way of all households." He glanced toward Eloise's hidden corner, though he could not see her. "There was one among you," he continued, "who spoke when it was dangerous to speak. She is young. She has little power. Yet she carried the truth to me when others chose the safety of silence. I will not name her today, but you will see soon enough that she is not punished, as some of you may have feared. Instead, she will be entrusted with greater responsibility." People shifted, curious. Madame Lenoir's face was tight, but she bowed her head in acceptance. "It will be known in this house," Louis went on, "that telling the truth to me is not a crime even when it is inconvenient. Do you understand?" A murmur of assent rose. "Good," he said. "Now, let us see this child return to a room that suits him." The nursery was put in order with quiet urgency. The cradle was fresh sheeted. The small chest of clothes was opened. Toys were taken down from the shelf where they had been stored. When the nurse laid Adrien down, he kicked his legs and waved his arms as if recognizing his surroundings. "You remember, do you?" she whispered, smiling through tears. "You remember your little room?" Madame Bernard stood near the window, dabbing at her eyes with a corner of her apron. Eloise hovered at the door, unsure whether she had any right to step farther. The nurse saw her and beckoned. "Come," she said. "He knows you too." Eloise entered slowly. Louis was there as well, leaning against the mantel, arms folded loosely. He watched as Eloise approached the cradle. Adrien's gaze caught her. He made an eager little sound and flailed his arms. She laughed, the sound breaking free like sunlight. "Do you scold him often that he is so happy to see you?" Louis asked quietly. "I never scold him," she said, eyes still on the baby. "I only tell him stories about how the kitchens smell on bread days, about the old horse that always sleeps in the same corner of the stable, about the stars he cannot see from his window." "And what does he tell you?" Louis asked. "He tells me nothing," she said. "Yet," her hand curled around the edge of the cradle. "But he listens," she added, "and sometimes he smiles as if he understands more than any of us." Louis studied her face. "You will continue to be with him," he said, "if you wish it." She turned to him, startled. "Highness," she breathed. "I need someone near him who sees a child, not a problem," he said. "Someone who will tell me if ever this house forgets again what it owes him. Do you feel equal to that task?" Her throat tightened. "I am only a maid," she said. "You are the maid who stood at my nursery door and defied a woman everyone else feared," he answered. "That outweighs many titles." A faint smile tugged at her lips, though her eyes were wet. "I will do my best," she said. "I know," he replied simply. Over the next days, the rhythm of Villeneuve shifted. The scandal of Camille's departure thickened and then slowly thinned into rumor. Some said she had left because of politics. Others whispered of disagreements in private. No one outside the chateau knew of the child in the nursery and the choices made around his cradle. Within the house, those who had watched from the edges took their lesson. In the kitchens, the scullery girl said, "I never thought a maid's words could reach a prince." The cook snorted. "Then you have not lived long enough," she replied. "Some words carry further than others." Madame Lenoir called Eloise into her office and cleared her throat awkwardly. "I have reconsidered your assignment," she said. "It appears I misjudged certain aspects of your character." Eloise stood straight. "I will obey whatever duties you give me, madam," she said. "That has not changed." Madame Lenoir's stern face softened slightly. "You will return to the nursery," she said. "In a more formal capacity. His Highness wishes you to be registered as under nurse. Your wages will increase. Your position will be different." Different was her careful way of saying important. Eloise's hand flew to her mouth. "Madame, Do not thank me," Madame Lenoir said briskly. "The instruction came from above my head. I merely carry it out." She paused. "But I will say this much," she added. "I was wrong to think you only a troublemaker. It seems your trouble has done some good." That night, Eloise wrote to her parents with trembling fingers. She did not tell them everything. She spoke of a child needing her care, of a change in position, of wages slightly higher than before. Her father would frown and nod, she knew. Her mother would press the letter to her heart. Her sisters would crowd around the table and ask 100 questions. Her brother would pretend not to care and then boast of it to his friends. Days passed. Adrien grew stronger, heavier in her arms. His laugh came more easily. He babbled sounds that meant nothing and everything. Louis came often to the nursery. At first he stood at a distance, as if unsure how close he was allowed to come. Then, one afternoon, He let Eloise place the child in his arms. "He is not made of glass, Highness," she said gently. "He will not shatter if you hold him." "I know," he said. "It is I who feel fragile." But he took the boy, cradling him against his shoulder. Adrien promptly grabbed a lock of his hair and yanked. Louis winced, then laughed. "Ah," he said, "a true Orléans, already grasping at crowns." "Perhaps he only wants your attention," Eloise said. "He already has it," Louis replied softly. He began to spend more time there, sometimes in silence, sometimes speaking to Eloise in low tones while Adrien slept. They spoke of small things at first, the behavior of horses, the stubbornness of old servants, the ways the wind crept through the stone in winter. Then slowly they spoke of heavier matters. "Do you resent me?" he asked her once unexpectedly as they watched Adrien dream. "For what, Highness?" she replied. "For not knowing sooner," he said. "For letting it reach the point where you had to act in my place." She shook her head. "No," she said. "I do not resent you. I am glad you listened when it mattered." He considered that, then nodded. "And you?" he asked her another day. "Do you regret what you did? The risk you took?" She looked at Adrien, sleeping peacefully, his hand curled around one of her fingers. "No," she said quietly. "If I had stayed silent, I would have regretted it all my life." He watched her as she said it, something warm and thoughtful in his gaze. One evening, as autumn edged closer, the nursery lay in soft lamplight. Adrien had finally surrendered to sleep after a long battle against his own eyelids. His small breaths rose and fell in steady rhythm. Eloise sat beside the cradle, humming under her breath, though there was no need now to soothe him. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of the mattress. The room smelled faintly of soap and starch and something sweeter she could not name, a quiet mixture of hope and fatigue. She did not hear the footsteps in the corridor. Louis stopped at the door and looked in. He did not announce himself. He saw Eloise there, shoulders relaxed for the first time in days, head bowed slightly over the cradle as if in silent promise. He saw Adrien sleeping, safe at last, in the place he should never have left. He stood there for a long moment without speaking, simply watching, as if wanting to fix the picture in his mind and never let it fade. Autumn settled around Villeneuve slowly. The leaves beyond the windows turned and fell. Fires were lit earlier in the evenings. Adrien learned to stand by holding onto the edge of the cradle, then to wobble from chair to chair, with the stubborn determination of a small soldier. "Careful," Eloise would murmur, hands ready but not grasping. One foot, then the other. "Yes," like that. He would look back at her with a proud, lopsided grin and promptly sit down. The nursery was no longer a secret corner of the chateau. People came and went without whispers now. Madame Bernard visited with stories of when your father was this high. Footmen paused at the door to make faces until Adrien shrieked with laughter. Even the cook sent little sugared biscuits up for the boy and perhaps for the nurse if she behaves. Louis came often. Sometimes he brought papers and sat in the corner, pretending to read while his eyes kept drifting to the cradle. Sometimes he arrived with a new toy, pretending he had found it by chance in some neglected room. Sometimes he came with only his hands and his thoughts. He and Eloise fell into a quiet rhythm. "His Highness is busy today," she would say on mornings he did not appear. "He has gentlemen to argue with and papers to sign, you see? Even uncles must work." On the days he did come, she would step back a little, giving him space. "Do you wish to hold him?" she would ask. He would always say yes. One afternoon, when the light was thin and golden, Louis stood at the nursery window looking out at the bare branches. "I must go to Paris," he said. Eloise, who was folding small shirts, paused. "For long?" she asked. "A few weeks," he answered. "Perhaps more. There are matters that cannot be settled by letter. The council is restless. They wish to see my face and measure my obedience." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. "Obedience to what?" she asked. "To everything," he said lightly. "To their ideas of order, to their plans for my future, to the shape of my life before it is lived." She sensed the weight beneath the jest. "They will speak of marriage," she said quietly. He smiled without quite meeting her eyes. "They never stop," he said. "But yes, this time they will shout a little louder." Her hands moved again, smoothing a wrinkle that was not there. "You will choose someone suitable," she said. "So they tell me," he replied. She kept her eyes on the cloth. Someone who understands your world, she added. Someone who knows how to stand in those rooms with you. Perhaps, he said. He watched her for a moment. And you? He asked. What will you do while I am gone? I will see that Adrian does not eat the tinder from the fireplace, she said, forcing a smile. I will tell him stories you would disapprove of, and then pretend I did not. I will... Wait. For what? He asked. For your return, she said simply. A silence opened between them, deeper than the small room. He crossed to the cradle, bent and pressed his lips to Adrian's soft hair. Be good, he murmured. Do not grow too much without me. Adrian grabbed his nose in answer. Louis laughed and straightened. He turned to Eloise. And you, he said softly. Be brave. I am only here, she replied. It is you who must be brave in Paris. The courage required there, he said, is of a different kind. He hesitated. If they speak unkindly of the child while I am gone, he added, if anyone suggests moving him again, you will send word at once. Her eyes flashed. They will not, she said. Not while I stand between him and the door. He looked at her, and whatever he saw there seemed to ease something in him. Then I go with a lighter heart, he said. He left 2 days later with less ceremony than before. The household lined the front steps to see him off. Adrian, too young to understand, waved a cloth from the nursery window because Eloise told him to. Say goodbye, she whispered. He will be back. He promised. To her surprise, the promise mattered to her almost as much as to the child. In Paris, Louis did what princes are expected to do. He attended councils. He listened to speeches that wound in circles. He signed papers. He smiled at people who hoped to read nations in his eyes. In dim, smoky rooms, elder statesmen spoke of alliances and security. You are of an age to marry, one said. It is time to bind your future to that of the kingdom more firmly. We have a list of ladies, another added. Each union would bring advantages, wealth, land, influence. We will review them with you. The names flowed past him like water. Some he knew, some he had met only in passing, some he had never heard. All of them were suitable. All of them were proper. None of them made his chest tighten with anything resembling longing. At a reception, he danced with 3 of them. They were charming, clever, well-gowned. They spoke of music and literature and the latest fashions from abroad. They smiled up at him with hope and calculation. He smiled back, courteous and distant. Between dances, he drifted to the edge of the room, where the light was softer. A minister approached him, glass in hand. Well, the man asked cheerfully, any lady catch your eye, Highness? Several, Louis replied. They are all very accomplished. But, the minister pressed with a knowing grin, but I seem to have left my heart in a draughty nursery in the country, Louis said before he could stop himself. The minister laughed, thinking it a jest. Ah, you speak of your little ward, he said. Children have a way of catching us unawares. Yes, Louis replied, hiding his real meaning behind the smile. They do. That night in his borrowed Paris rooms, he lay awake longer than he wished. He tried to picture a life with one of the ladies he had danced with. He imagined them in Villeneuve, walking through the halls, giving orders. He imagined them in the nursery, bending over Adrian's cradle. The image would not settle, it blurred, flickered, vanished. Then he imagined another figure there, a young woman with weary hands and bright, steady eyes, humming under her breath while a child reached for her hair. His heart clenched. This is impossible, he told the ceiling. It did not answer. What would you have me do? He whispered. Choose a wife for her rank and spend my life measuring everything she is against everything Eloise is, or defy them all and make a scandal of my marriage? He could almost hear Camille's voice in his head. You will regret this, she had said. He turned his face into the pillow. In some things, he murmured, I prefer my regrets to my obedience. A week later, after another long, circling discussion about alliances, he raised his hand to speak. The council fell quiet. Gentlemen, he said, I have considered your suggestions. I understand their merit. But I will not choose a bride like a piece on a chessboard. When I marry, it will be to someone I trust more than I trust your strategies. A stir ran around the table. You speak of the heart, one said, half amused, half exasperated. We speak of nations. The heart carries nations more often than you think, Louis replied. I do not dismiss your concerns. but I ask that for the moment you dismiss mine from your agendas. When there is something to announce, you will hear it from me." "Highness," another protested, "this is not a matter for impulse." "My impulses are well trained," he said calmly. "For you may trust that I will not marry the first woman who smiles at me." He did not add that he had already chosen the one who smiled only when she forgot to be afraid. He left Paris sooner than expected. Back at Villeneuve, winter had put a thin grey veil over the fields. The morning his carriage rolled into the courtyard, the air was sharp. Eloise, who had been bundling Adrian in an extra blanket for his daily walk along the corridor, heard the distant shout. "He is back," a maid cried. "The prince is back." Adrian clapped his hands at the noise. "You are pleased," she said, voice tight. "So am I." She carried him to the staircase window, in time to see Louis step out of the carriage. He looked tired, but his eyes searched the facade as if for something specific. "Look," she told Adrian. "There he is, your uncle." The child smacked the glass with his palm. Louis looked up. For a moment it seemed he saw them. Nurse, child, shadowed figure behind. But perhaps it was only the way his gaze lingered on that window, softened, then moved on. The house unfolded around him again. Greetings, reports, small jokes. He accepted them all with the ease of habit, but his steps, when he was finally free, did not take him to the grand salon. They took him to the chapel. It was a small room near the heart of the chateau, with cool stone walls and a simple altar. Eloise went there sometimes when the days felt too heavy, to sit in the hush and let her thoughts slow. She was there now. Adrien had been taken by the nurse for his midday nap. The nursery felt too empty without his breathing, so Eloise had slipped away for a few moments of quiet. She sat in the third pew, hands loosely folded, eyes on the candles. The door opened behind her. She turned, startled. Louis stood there, framed in the doorway. She rose at once. "Highness," she said, dipping an awkward curtsy. "I did not know you had returned. I would have—" "There is nothing you should have done differently," he said, closing the door gently. "Except perhaps stay exactly where you are." She flushed. "I should leave," she said. "You must want privacy." "I have had too much of that in Paris," he said. "Stay." She sank back onto the bench because her knees were too weak to defy him. He came down the aisle and sat beside her, not too close, not too far. For a moment they simply listened to the silence. "How is he?" Louis asked at last. "Adrien?" "Stubborn," she replied, a smile flickering. "Hungry, loud, perfect." He exhaled a soft chuckle. "That sounds correct," he said. She glanced at him. "And Paris?" she asked. "Did it treat you kindly?" "It treated me as it treats everyone," he replied, with flattery and demands. "And the council?" she pressed. "Did they agree with you about the child?" "I did not give them the chance to disagree," he said. "Villeneuve remains under my authority. What happens within these walls is, for now, my affair. If they wish to argue, they will have to walk these corridors themselves." She relaxed a little. "And the other matter?" she asked before she could stop herself. "The one they always press on you." "Marriage," he said. Color rose in her cheeks. "Yes," she murmured. "They spoke of it," he said, "endlessly. They offered me lists. I gave them no names in return." "So you chose no one," she said. He turned his head toward her. "On the contrary," he said softly, "I chose very clearly." Her breath caught. "I do not understand," she whispered. "You will," he said. He stood abruptly as if the words inside him were too large for that immobile bench. He moved a few steps toward the altar, then turned back. "When I was a boy," he began, "my tutor told me a prince's life is a line drawn by others. Parents, teachers, ministers, diplomats, they all take the chalk in turns. One day," he said, "I would look back and see that the path beneath my feet had been decided by hands not my own." He smiled faintly. "I believed him," he said. "I have lived as if it were true. I let others decide when I should travel, what I should say in council, which estates I should visit. But there is one decision I find I cannot give away. Not to them, not to anyone." He took a breath. "I cannot give away the choice of the person who stands beside me when the doors close and the candles are blown out," he said quietly. "The person who tells me when I am wrong. The person whose word I will believe when everyone else lies." Her heart pounded. "Highness," she began. "Louis," he said, "say my name. Just once here." where no one can faint from shock. She swallowed. Louis, she whispered. The sound trembled between them. He closed his eyes briefly as if savoring it. In Paris, he continued, I tried to imagine a future that would please them. A grand wedding, a princess from another house, crowds cheering. It all seemed correct. He opened his eyes. But whenever I tried to see the face of that princess, it blurred, he said. It refused to come into focus. And when I forced one of those names into place, my chest felt as tight as this chapel on feast days. He took a few steps back toward her. Then, without meaning to, I imagined something else, he said. I saw a small ceremony, familiar faces, a boy toddling down an aisle with flowers in his fist, and at the other end, a woman who once stood alone in a cold corridor and said to someone far above her, Please, do not do this. Eloise's hand flew to her mouth. Do not, she said faintly. Do not say what you are about to say. He smiled sadly. I must, he said. It is the first thing that has felt entirely mine. He stopped a pace away from her. Eloise, he said, her name gentle and sure. I admire many things in you. Your kindness with a child no one was meant to love. Your stubbornness when you believe something is wrong. Your refusal to twist your heart into shapes that would fit easier into other people's expectations. He shook his head slightly, as if amazed at himself. I did not plan to care for you, he admitted. Princes are not trained for that. We are trained to choose, not to feel, and yet I find that when I am away from Villeneuve, it is your voice in the nursery that I hear, telling a little boy stories about stars he cannot see. She stared at him, eyes wide and wet. This is cruel, she whispered, to say such things to someone who cannot reach the place where you stand. It would be cruel, he said, if I meant only to praise you and then leave you where you are. I do not. Her knees trembled. What do you mean? She asked. He lowered himself slowly to one knee on the cold stone. It was not a theatrical gesture. It was simple, almost clumsy, but it made her world tilt. Louis, she breathed. You must not. I must, he said calmly. If I stand above you while I ask this, it will sound like a command. I want no command between us in this moment. He looked up at her, and she saw no prince there, only a man stripped of the safety of titles. Eloise, he said, I ask you not as a prince asking a maid for loyalty, but as a man asking a woman for her life. Will you marry me? The chapel seemed to hold its breath. Her fingers dug into the wood of the pew. You cannot, she whispered. It is not permitted. I am no one. The council will rage. The court will laugh. They will say you have thrown away alliances for a pair of worn hands and a pretty story. I have heard worse said of better choices, he replied. As for permission, I require less of it than you think. There will be displeasure, yes. There will be muttering. But there will also be respect in time for a man who chose his own wife and stood by her. What of Adrian? She asked desperately. If you marry beneath you, they will use it against him. They will say your judgment is unsound. They will say... They already say that, he interrupted gently. They will say it whatever I do. Let them. The boy's safety will come not from my obedience to their prejudices, but from the clarity of the life we build here. Tears spilled over at last. Louis, she said, his name a broken sigh. I am afraid. So am I, he answered. But I am more afraid of spending my life beside someone I do not trust, looking back at this moment and wondering what might have been if I had dared. She laughed weakly through her tears. You speak as if you are not the brave one, she said. Perhaps courage is catching, he replied. I have been watching you too long. He extended his hand. I cannot promise you ease, he said. I cannot promise that people will always be kind. But I can promise that I will stand in every room beside you, not in front of you or behind you, and that when you say, this is wrong, I will not silence you. Her vision blurred. You would make a maid a princess, she whispered. I would make the woman I love my wife, he said simply. Titles can follow as they please. The word hung between them. Love. It sank into her skin, frightening and warm. She thought of the night in the corridor, her palms pressed to the cold door, her voice small and shaking. She thought of the carriage wheels grinding over stones. She thought of the moment he had looked at her and asked for truth, and the way he had believed it when she gave it. She thought of Adrian's laugh when Louis entered the room. Do you love me? He asked softly. She closed her eyes, not to escape the question but to feel it fully. "Yes," she said. The word came out thin, then strengthened. "Yes," she repeated. "I tried not to. It seemed ungrateful, impossible, but yes." He let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh or a prayer. "Then I ask again," he said, "will you marry me, Eloise?" She opened her eyes. The fear was still there. So was something larger. She took his extended hand. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Relief flooded his face, lighting it from within. He rose, not letting go of her fingers. "For the record," he said with a crooked smile, "that is the first time you have agreed with me so quickly." She laughed, wiping at her cheeks with her free hand. "Do not grow accustomed to it," she said. "I would not dare," he replied. They stood there a moment, hands joined, the chapel suddenly less cold. "How will we tell the others?" she asked, half-dazed. "How will you tell the council?" "Gently," he said, "and firmly. We will begin here. With the people who know us not as symbols but as ourselves." He lifted her hand and brushed his lips over her knuckles. "I must speak with Madame Lenoir," he added. "She will need time to adjust her ledgers to such an outrageous marriage." Eloise shook her head, smiling through her tears. "She will pretend to disapprove," she said. "Then she will reorganize the entire household before dawn." "You know her well," he replied. "And Adrian?" she asked. "Will you tell him?" "He already thinks you belong to him," Louis said. "He will simply assume I do as well." He walked her back to the nursery. The nurse's eyes widened when she saw their joined hands. "Highness?" she breathed. "Later," he said gently. "For now let us wake this tyrant and inform him that his household is changing." Adrian, pulled from sleep, blinked up at them. Louis lifted him, then looked at Eloise. "This," he said softly, "is our beginning." The wedding took place some weeks later. It was not in Paris, not before crowds and trumpets, but in the small chapel at Villeneuve. The council had been informed in polite phrases that left no room for negotiation. Some members fumed in private. One or two wrote letters full of warnings. The king, when he heard, is said to have smiled faintly and said only, "Louis always did prefer the honest complication to the convenient lie." In the chateau, preparations were simple and wholehearted. Madame Lenoir oversaw everything with a fierce, quiet pride. The cook produced more pastries than anyone could eat. The maids whispered excitedly as they helped adjust a borrowed gown to fit Eloise's figure. "I never thought I would be lacing you into anything but a work dress," one said, laughing through tears. "Nor I," Eloise replied. On the morning of the ceremony, the sky was pale and clear. The chapel filled with familiar faces, servants, stewards, the old doctor from the village who had once bandaged Louis's knee after a fall, Madame Bernard, in her best, slightly faded shawl. The nurse held Adrien near the front, trying in vain to keep him from wriggling. Louis stood at the altar, not in full regalia, but in a dark, well-cut coat. He looked toward the door every few seconds. Music, thin and sweet, began from a small corner where a footman scraped nervously at a violin. The door opened. Eloise stepped in. Her gown was simple, made from fine fabric but without heavy jewels. Her hair was arranged with more care than usual, a few curls left soft around her face. She carried a small bouquet of winter flowers. She felt every eye on her, but for once it did not send her shrinking inward. She walked down the aisle as if she were walking between two parts of her own life. Halfway, Adrien broke free of the nurse's arms and toddled toward her, fists full of petals someone had given him to scatter at the wrong time. Laughter warmed the chapel. Louis moved to meet them both. He scooped up Adrien, who offered him a crumpled flower, then held out his other hand to Eloise. "Shall we?" he asked, voice low and steady. "Yes," she said. They stood before the altar, their fingers entwined. The old priest who had baptized Louis as a child and buried his brother looked at them with eyes that had seen much. "You come here," he said, "not as prince and servant, not as high and low, but as two souls choosing to share a path. Do you understand the seriousness of that choice?" "Yes," they answered together. They spoke their vows, simple words that felt heavier than any speeches in Paris. "I promise to listen when it is hard," Louis said, looking at her. "Even when your words unsettle me. I promise not to silence your conscience when it troubles mine." "I promise to stand beside you," Eloise replied, "even when the world thinks I should stand behind. I promise to tell you the truth, even when you would rather hear something softer." They exchanged rings. Adrien, impatient, reached for Eloise's hand as soon as the band was in place, as if to include himself in the promise. The priest smiled. "Then by the grace given to me," he said, "and before these witnesses, I declare you husband and wife." Louis leaned forward and pressed his lips to Eloise's brow, a kiss full of reverence and relief. Applause burst from the assembled crowd. In the courtyard afterward, as bells rang and people embraced, Madame Bernard caught Eloise's hands. "My dear," she said, eyes bright, "from the laundry to the altar, I always suspected you were meant for more than polishing candlesticks." Eloise laughed, still dazed. "I am still not certain I am meant for this," she said. "None of us is meant for the lives we end up living," Madame Bernard replied. "We build them one choice at a time." Across the yard, Louis stood with the steward and Monsieur Vaillant, who were already fretting about protocol. "People will talk," the steward murmured. "Let them," Louis said. "They would have talked whoever I married. At least now they will speak of something true." He looked over and met Eloise's eyes. He lifted his glass to her. She raised hers in answer, hand steady. Later, when the sun had dipped low and the candles had been lit, they found a quiet moment on the small balcony outside the nursery. Adrian slept inside, exhausted by the excitement of the day. Below them, the faint echoes of celebration floated up. Eloise leaned on the stone railing, her wedding ring cool on her finger. Louis stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "Are you overwhelmed?" he asked. "Completely," she said, "and, strangely, calm." He smiled. "That is how I felt the first time I addressed the council," he said. "Perhaps marriage and politics are not so different." She laughed softly. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Any of it?" He looked out at the dark shapes of the trees, then at the light glowing behind the nursery window. "I regret only that it took a frightened maid and a nearly stolen child to make me see what kind of life I wanted," he said. "The rest, no." She turned to him. "I was so afraid that night," she said. "When I stood at the nursery door and said, 'Please, do not do this,' I thought my words would disappear into the wood and leave no trace. They changed everything," he said. "They stopped a carriage from carrying my nephew out of my life. They pulled the mask from a woman I did not truly know. They brought you to my side. I think of them often." "You do?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Whenever I am tempted to stay silent in council or to ignore some small injustice because it is easier, I hear that plea again. Please, do not do this. It has become a question I must ask myself before every choice." She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. "Perhaps that is all we ever truly do," she said. "Say yes to some things and no to others. And trust that the right no can lead to a better yes," he replied. They stood there a while longer, listening to the quiet. From inside the nursery came a small rustle. Adrien had turned in his sleep, seeking the familiar weight of safety. "He dreams," Eloise murmured. "Of what?" Louis asked. "Of voices that did not fail him," she said. Louis took her hand. "Whatever storms come," he said, "we will stand in that doorway together." She nodded. "And when fear returns," she answered, "we will remember this, that a life can change because one person refused to accept what was easy over what was right." He squeezed her fingers. "And because another person was willing to listen," he added. She smiled. "Then perhaps," she said, "we have already given Adrien the most important thing we could." "And what is that?" he asked. "An example," she replied, "that even in a house of stone and rules, a small voice can be heard, and a heart can choose its own path." He looked at her, eyes warm. "Together, then," he said. "Together," she answered. Behind them, the nursery lamp burned steadily, casting a gentle circle of light around the cradle where the future of their little world slept in peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.